Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real Talk. Just a couple things to note before we get into today's show. If Real Talk has impacted you, we would love if you would take a minute and leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. This is a huge help for us in promoting Real Talk to those who have never listened. And, as always, today's episode is brought to you by our official sponsor, Trivan, builders of custom trucks, trailers, and enclosure buildings tailored to your needs. Be sure to check them out at www.trivan.com. A huge thanks to them for making this conversation possible. Now on to today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Real Talk podcast. It is Lucas here hosting, and on today's show, our guest is Mike Bosveld. Now, the reason we're having Mike on is, apart from just being a fantastic local community advocate, we really want to learn from his local service in terms of the volunteer projects he's been involved with. I think broadly speaking, on this podcast, we talk a lot about different ailments of society, different cultural trends, reasons to be concerned. We do try to learn about issues in the church and whatnot too, but it's no surprise to anybody that, the culture is heading in an anti-Christian direction. It's largely there already. And it can be a bit discouraging at times, but yet we see that there also are reasons for hope too. And one of those reasons for hope is just the opportunity that lies out in front of us for everybody listening in your local community. So the reason Mike is here today is because he's been successful in a number of local initiatives in his community, helping out multiple causes that we'll get into, but helping out people in need fundamentally. And he's had good success with getting not just Christians involved, of course, and that's important, but also getting support and help from people outside the Christian community as well, kind of rallying them around these various causes, whether that be food drives or shelter for those who need shelter and whatnot. So that's the reason Mike is here today. So I think Mike will just throw it over to you to give you the floor and say, just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what do you kind of get up to each and every day.
Wow. Thank you. That was quite an intro. Yeah, I'll do my best. So I guess who am I? I grew up going to Christian school, and I went to HDCH, and I grew up, really involved in our local church. The food drive that we do now is based on something that we did when I was little. Some of my earliest church memories are kind of going door to door, um, knocking on the doors in this community in Flamborough, and collecting food and sorting it back at the church, and doing different initiatives that way. And um, then I went to school, and actually went to school to be a boat mechanic. So
No way.
So it was, yeah, I'm no theologian, that's for sure. And then did a little bit of business stuff at Mohawk, and now I work for a family business in marketing. Um, and when I met my wife, when I met uh, my now wife, she went to a different church, and we ended up um, kind of going to another church altogether, and then um, getting involved in the young adults ministry there, leading that, and really kind of wetting our feet on different teaching and leading opportunities. And so, um, the journey really started there for me. Um, we we were leading this young adults group, and um, I don't know if I should give away the punchline yet, but basically we um, yeah uh, we had a good year. We had some successes. We learned a little bit how to teach and what makes young people tick, and we sort of got to the end of a good year, and asked them, what do you guys need more of? How do you go deeper in your faith? What's important to you? And the answer that we got back from them was service opportunity. And that was, I think, a real pivotal moment for me in my own journey, and and it really took off from there. Um, we so what I did is I went back to this church that I grew up in, and I basically ripped off everything they had done for a number of years, um, and took the food drive model they did,
Yeah.
um, and and we applied it to our little town, and we ran it with our young adults, and they were um, instrumental in it. They did all this groundwork, and they did all this organizing, and we sort of helped organize that. And what was interesting when we did our food drive is that there was another group who had been doing a food drive in a similar way, covering the same area previous to us.
Okay.
Um, and they had done in their first year, they had done 1,200 pounds of food, and in their best year, they had done about 3,400 pounds of food.
Yeah.
And by the grace of God, our first year we did about 18,000 pounds of food in the
Okay.
same covering the same area. So it to me it was um, a an example of what what God can do and wants to do with His church,
Yeah.
and I would say from there it just opportunities just continue to open up, and God opened a lot of doors. Just starting with these kind of humble, you know, ramshackle
Yeah.
kind of starting place. So
Yeah, cool. So yeah, you meet your wife or your now wife, I
yeah,
suppose, as you termed her there, and then you end up joining the church that you guys are at I think it's fair to share that, like the Gateway Church in Caledonia,
yeah,
right? So you grew up in the CRC circle, so broadly Reformed, and yeah, I mean, just to speak to that point for a minute, the point of this podcast is to learn from the the service that you've been able to give to the local community, and
hmm,
again the involvement with people outside the church. So setting aside any separate theological issues, I think
hmm,
it's just important to state that that is the point of what the conversation we're driving at here. So I really want to dig into the food drive, and then we'll kind of go to a few other topics there. But I think the food drive, that's interesting. So a giant increase in the amount of food you're able to collect. What drove that, apart from obviously God's blessing and the providence of the Lord? But did you have more involvement, like just many hands make light work sort of thing? Did you have a
yeah.
specific strategy? Did you reach out to certain people? How'd you reach that kind of success there?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I think there's a lot to it. I think the short answer is more involvement, and I think that more involvement stems from good organization,
Yep,
and I think that uh, not to be misunderstood, but I think good leadership is ultimately where that comes
for
from.
sure. Yeah, totally.
Um, I benefited, like I said, from 20 years of other people figuring this out, and we basically copied the Flamborough food drive, and the Ancaster food drive is well established at that point, and basically took some points from all of them, amalgamated it, used a little bit of technology that we brought to the table, right? Google Maps
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
and lawn signs and all kinds of stuff like that. And we really made it modular, where people just had to go. They didn't have to help um, all this extra paper sorting and all this extra figuring out. We sort of came to the table with a model,
yep,
and our church was able to just plug into it. The expectation was very clear. The instructions were very clear. They had confidence in the structure, um, and um, there's a lot of there's an amazing story to this too, where things like the local food drive are such an obvious and really fun and wonderful, like, community or church event,
yep,
right? So you can have basically a single Saturday. You're done by noon.
yep.
You come, around 9:30. You have coffee together, kind of rub elbows. You listen to some instructions. You have a prayer, and you go. You go for an hour and a half walk with your friends or your family or whatever. One person's driving. Everybody's going door to door. People are leaving giant bags of food on their front door that you get to pick up and bring to your car. It's fun. Like
Yeah,
I hear that over and over,
yeah,
and then you get to bring it back to the church, sort it, which is, again, it's just kind of fun. It's a little bit different. Helps if the weather's good,
yeah, of
and
course.
uh,
Yeah, yeah,
and then yeah, you have lunch and you go home, and it's
yeah,
like you have this big impact on you're raising tens of thousands of pounds of food pretty well wherever you do it.
yeah.
Um, and just to put this in perspective too, so we do this in Caledonia. We cover something like I think the population of Caledonia is between 12 and 15,000 now. Um, and we do it with between 150 and 200 volunteers. So
Wow.
there's a lot of churches that can cover, you know, I think about Dunville. Dunville does it now
Yeah. Yeah.
with some people that you know,
Yep.
um, and they can take the model, they can apply it, and yeah, with 100 people, I mean, you can cover something like 10,000 houses, right?
That's nuts.
And it's amazing the impact that can have, and it's not just that you raise food,
Yep.
you also get a cool church event out of it. You also get to just kind of be the hands and feet for a day,
Yep.
and you get to show your community what you're all about, um, and you get to encourage the food bank, because it's like, oh, this is kind of like their Super Bowl,
Mm-hmm.
and you also get to kind of give your kids, I have young kids, and I want them to see this, and I don't want them to just see it. I want them to sort of um, create that muscle memory of, this is a little bit of what we do.
Yep.
Keep doing it, kind of
Yep.
thing.
Yeah. Keep helping out. Right on. Okay. So then you have this model in place. It sounds like something that's easily spread to other areas. Did you just stay in Caledonia, or were you able to move it to larger spaces?
Yeah, it was really it, it was amazing how God sort of just opened doors. um, so we lived in Brantford at the time, or we moved in Brantford anyway, and we kind of felt, hey, this is way bigger need in Brantford. Um,
Big time. Yeah.
you know, um, big 100,000 people city. They give out, at the time, I think they were giving out 800,000 pounds of food in a year. Thousands of users a month in Brantford at the local food bank, and lots of churches around. So what do you do, right? So we ended up taking that model to the local ministerial, kind of showing it to them in this very developed model that I sort of had, and I'd sort of taken the Caledonia model and applied it to um, about a dozen different churches that would all work together at the same time, in a way that you could cover the whole city, and sort of work that out logistically and relationally, because when you get different churches working together, um, that there's all kinds of questions there, right? And you need to make sure that you're respectful, and that you build trust, so that they're willing to kind of put their name on the same thing that somebody else's name is on,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
um, make sure that we're going to do that, right? And so the first year we were able to launch it in Brantford with 6 different churches. We raised about I think it was about 27,500 pounds in a day, which that's a lot of food,
Yeah.
and it's really amazing. The supports that come out of the woodwork,
Yeah.
when you sort of flex those muscles or kind of stress test, it's really amazing to see kind of who comes out, and it's like, oh, didn't you know that, you know, uh, brother John has a van truck,
Yeah.
and that person has a connection at a box company, and this person
Yeah. Yeah.
owns a container company,
Yeah.
and all these things came together, and over just a couple of years, the second year we had 9 churches um, come out. And what was really interesting was, um, I'm trying to remember now. I think it was the second year, uh, COVID came around,
Oh, yeah.
and we said, well, are we going to do this or not? Um, and we ended up doing it, and we ended up, doing amazing. I think we had 44,000 pounds raised our second year.
Oh, wow.
And then our third year in Brantford, we had 47,000 pounds, um, from the 9 churches. And yeah, it was amazing. We had, like I said, there's a company with container trucks. They basically put a container at each church, and it would show up full of boxes. You'd fold out the boxes, and basically you'd fill them up with the food you collect, and you'd put them back in the container, and close the doors, and you're done. And the container would just get taken away, and
Yeah.
offloaded. All the skids get offloaded at the food bank, um, and yeah, like, really starting to find out, okay, what's our box supplier? What's our, and just, yeah, the way that the community, that this group of different churches um, just sort of activated, and just was like, oh yeah, yeah, we'll do it. Like,
Well, no problem. Yeah.
easy topic to sort of cooperate on too, which I
Yeah.
thought was really,
Yeah.
really
Was
amazing.
that a challenge at all to get churches of different backgrounds to work together? Like, did you have to do anything specific that way, or?
Oh, um, I would say that it was. not a challenge to get churches of different backgrounds to work together. Um, it, uh, um, Churches are just at different capacity levels and have different focus. Um, yeah, they have different focuses
Okay.
at different times. And so I mean, boy, have I probably gone to well over 20 different churches in my day to make my pitch for the food drive. And we've had um, 10 or 12 locally anyway in Brantford um, participate. But yeah, and I can go and speak to all the churches and as much as there's different philosophies across the board. Um, it's just everybody sort of gets it. It's like you know um, we're feeding people,
Yep.
and we're also showing people that we're going to feed people. you know,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
and it's there's just this. There seems to be at least on that topic, just broad
I mean,
comfort.
who's going to be against a food drive?
Right, right.
It's a food drive. People need to eat, so fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too. The Reformed tradition's a big part. Has always been a big part of
Yeah. Okay.
the food drive here, right? Like it came from, and they're the ones in my case who worked it out. Like the CRC church I grew up
Yep.
in Brantford. I believe 5 of the 9 churches that participate are Reformed,
Nice. Right on.
which is amazing, and they just really get it.
Yeah.
They've got the community set. It's
Yeah.
like when you show up a little bit early, um, it's usually like one of their families and about 5 small children building the boxes,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, they've got that part figured out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. So it sounds like a pretty set model, pretty easy. Are you contacting people before when you go door to door, or are you just going door to door and saying, "Hey, can we get
Yeah.
some food?"
So the model that we use that I've used for all the food drives I've been a part of is one where um, you send out a flyer or nowadays a door hanger
Yeah.
about a week before, and so you make your routes on Google Maps,
Yeah.
and you send teams out and to about 150 houses if they're in a subdivision. Takes between 1 and 2 hours to kind of go for a walk. Hang those door hangers on all the doors. We like to set out like bag lawn signs, like politician sign type things.
Oh, I've done the
Yeah.
campaigning thing. Yeah. I know
Okay.
what you
Yeah.
mean. Yeah. Yeah.
And just make people aware, and especially when you keep doing it over and over, it
Mm-hmm.
becomes a bit of an event where people just recognize, oh, that's happening again. They trust it, and they know if they leave something on their porch, to get picked up by the right people.
How often are you doing it?
So um, once a year is essentially the model,
Yeah.
but that's been it's a bit of work for a handful of people, but it's pretty easy for everybody else. So it could be done more often. Now we've timed it. I've always, when I started, I timed it based on when the food bank saw its lull, right? So basically, they get lots of food typically,
Yeah.
and from September to Christmas,
Okay.
people are feeling generous and
Yeah.
around. But then, after Christmas, February, March, food, um, the giving tends to drop off a bit.
Okay.
Sometimes the needs are a bit higher, and then everybody leaves for summer. So,
Yep.
besides the Easter blip, it can get a
Of
little
course.
dry in the spring. So that's sort of when we've timed it.
Nice. Right
Yeah.
on. Cool.
You asked a question about where the food drives was happening, if we
Yeah.
brought it anywhere else, and I just wanted to expand on that.
Yep.
Um, and not even by my own doing, but what's been really amazing to watch is to see it grow. So we helped a church in Mississaugas of the New Credit run one in Hagersville.
Oh, yeah.
And we helped another group do it in Paris because they had connections to Brantford, and they ran it with, I think, 5 churches and 3 service clubs, which is really cool to see them work together.
Yeah.
They reached so much food, it was a problem. So they had to, I think they've sort of changed their model a little bit there. And then now it's been run in Dunnville by a few of the Reform folk out there, which has been amazing. And they just do it on their own.
Yeah.
In Paris, it just happened on its own. And then I was talking to somebody from my church who travels to the States a bit for work.
Yeah.
And they said they were at this little dealership in Corey, Pennsylvania, I think. Pennsylvania or Ohio.
Okay.
Anyway, and there was all this food on the ground. And he said, "Oh, what's going on?" "Oh, we're having a food drive." "Oh, yeah." And then they had to come back to pick something up a little while later. And he said, where did you say you were from? Gateway Church in Caledonia? He said, "I think we do our food drive because of you guys." Somebody had traveled to Canada here,
No way.
seen our food drive, and went and started something in some little town in the States somewhere.
That's unreal.
And then we found out about it,
Yeah.
which is amazing,
Which
right?
is, yeah, that's
Well,
crazy.
Lord works in mysterious ways, right? So,
Absolutely. That's cool. That's cool.
yeah.
Sweet, man. All right. Well, that's crazy. Yeah. It's really cool to see it blossom and just grow, eh? That's awesome. All right. So you mentioned earlier you were doing some work with the ministerial at your church, and now that ties into some other projects that you've been involved with too.
Mhm.
Do you want to expand on that, and then we'll get into some of the other projects as well?
Yeah. So through the food drive, I got to meet some people who are already doing some stuff, specifically or primarily in Brantford. And one of the guys I met was Charlie Kopchak, who's the founder of the local youth center in Brantford. Why not City Missions? Um, and so I, got to know him, and this youth center's got a little food cupboard in it too, and they like every other food cupboard everywhere, basically, especially in a city, they run dry pretty often. And in this case, we're talking about basically teenagers that literally just don't have enough food at home for one reason or another. And so we ran some projects for that, set up some churches to kind of collect on an ongoing basis, made some new connections, and over time I got involved. With him with Why Not on the board, and then I've come to chair that board more recently, and just some other projects, I guess, that I've gotten involved in just through. Um, I would even say through the exposure to some of the work that's being done there is. Um, I'm on a team that is working to bring Indwell in some form to Brantford, um, and I'm also uh, working with my wife to see Safe Families chapter started in Haldeman, Norfolk.
That's awesome. Okay. That's a lot going on, man. You must be a busy guy.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. And you manage to squeeze the work in still from time to time too. Eh?
Sometimes I manage to work. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm actually also on a facility expansion team at my church right now. That's like an every 2 week thing. So yeah, you put that on top of a day job and some of these other stuff. It's
And you got a
um,
few kids, you said too?
I've got 2 kids,
Nice.
and actually we're in the process of an international adoption as well.
Right. Yeah. You
So
mentioned that before the show. That's
yeah,
awesome.
so
Wonderful.
yeah,
Okay. Well, we can get into adoption too if you want later
yeah.
on the show, but we got a few more things to cover first then. So all right, let's dive into Why Not to
Mhm.
start. So what's going on with Why Not? Why was it started? And what's the mission or what's the goal with that charity?
Yeah. So it's been around for 20 years. So there's a lot to all that. It was basically started, on a kind of a wing and a prayer.
Okay.
Our founder and his wife, basically felt called to go pray for people on the street. And so
Okay.
here's this couple, and they were midlife converts to
Mm,
Christianity. He was a postie, and they basically, I think, went on the side of the street in Brantford and offered coffee and prayer. And over time, they got to know some of the homeless population and some of the kids that were hanging out down there. And they operated a restaurant for a little while, and and then eventually started the youth center. They felt that was kind of the need, and that's where they built to. And they were able to put a team together and get a building, and it moved a little bit, and now is on Colburn Street in Brantford. Um, and then so that operated for a long time. They had some wonderful staff and volunteers. Right, it takes time to build up these things and create the
absolutely.
relationships and cover payroll and all that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And more recently, I believe in 2019, I believe. we went to 7 days a week. So it's basically open from 5 to 9 p.m. 7 days a week. It's a so it's a faith-based organization, but we don't lead with what we believe. We don't lead with theology with the youth that we interact with. You have to, you know, recognize when you deal um, with teens who are unchurched, um, who may very well have trauma, and all of these different experiences and influences. Um, if you put a cross on the front, put a steeple on this building, you're just not going to talk to certain people, right? And so we're really intentional with relationships, build real relationships with the people that we serve.
Yep.
Meet their needs, and um, I don't know if this is a proper explanation or a controversial point, but the very worst that we will do then is that they will go away from us, one, knowing that we were Christian,
Yep.
and also not being turned off of Christianity. Maybe we've planted a seed,
Yeah.
but um, we understand that we're not converting kids; we're serving them.
Yeah.
And what's been really amazing to watch is one of the things that we did uh, during COVID was that we were able to launch a youth church. One of our staff was a youth pastor at a local church, and so we can offer things like Alpha and youth church as a parallel program, something that staff are involved in, the kids are aware of, but it's very much just relationship based and just open to people who want to engage with that thing. What's really interesting, as much as both from a Christian perspective and from a secular perspective, that there's these strong views on like what you should or shouldn't be doing spiritually. The reality is a lot of these kids are searching, right? Like they know they have spiritual needs.
Big time. Yeah.
And they're into everything, right?
Yep.
They're going to be into, tarot cards and all kinds of different things
Yep.
that we may not even really understand, right?
Yep.
And so when you can offer these programs, and high quality ones too, where it's not just, me preaching, it's somebody who knows what they're talking about and who's the personality who can engage with them on their level,
Yeah.
who's had some of the same challenges that they have had, speak to them. And so, the proof is a little bit in the pudding. By the grace of God, we had 10 baptisms in our first year that we ran that church. And
Wow.
these are teenagers from downtown Brantford who engaged with the church. And that's not because we had just an amazing program running in that youth church. That's because we spent 3 to 5 years with each of those kids building relationships. They knew us.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
they're like,
Yep.
if something goes wrong, so a lot of the youth center kids, they something goes wrong in their life, they call us.
Yep.
Uh, and I should say I'm on the board. I'm not one of the
Staff.
staff, so
Yeah.
they call them. But I sat in court for an hour for one of our kids a couple weeks ago. And it was just why not staff there,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah,
Yeah. That's all they have.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's an opportunity to,
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
that program, so is the program the church service you're setting up, or is that something in addition to the youth church?
no, yeah. So the program, I guess, in
You
that
mentioned
case,
Alpha or something like that.
so that would be, yeah, youth church is something that we set up in parallel to the youth center, and then we also have and there are programs that run at different times.
Okay. Yeah.
But like we've run Alpha as an example, and
Okay.
it kind of depends on the group at the time. Youth centers are very in flux, right? Sometimes um, you'll have a group that's very engaged, and sometimes you won't, and sometimes you'll kind of have a core group, and then all of a sudden they all turn 20 together, they're out, right? And then
Oh,
but
yeah,
then
that's how it works. Yep. Okay.
you've got um,
I
but
knew
you'll have other kids in there at the same time, but you'll have smaller groups and different groups, and then you'll have we have a whole lot of 13-year-olds coming in right now. We've been very busy lately, and it's very interesting too. There's new issues with this group. There's different issues with this group.
Well, that was my next question. What are some of the themes or like the issues you're seeing that are common?
Violence among like 13-year-olds.
Violence against them from parental figures or in between youth or what?
Between youth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even I would say from youth too. adults more. We always see, you got to think about this. And it's funny because when you think about the Reformed tradition, it's almost hard to imagine, right? Because we do such an amazing job of of creating a strong, healthy community. It's like
Yeah.
you think about, okay, where would my kids go, after school at night or whatever? It's like, well, to a church thing. Mostly they'll be at my house, right?
Right.
Um, but
Home. Yeah.
uh, but
A
they'll
job
go, yeah, a
if they're
job,
working. Yeah.
all kinds of places,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, they'll go work on a tree farm or something,
Yeah.
or they'll mow the grass, volunteer, whatever.
Do their
And
homework.
here
Whatever.
here are here are a group of kids who are at the youth center, like 5 days a week,
Yeah.
right? And you think about what would it take? Okay, what it's almost unimaginable, right?
Yeah.
For the people who grew up in the Reformed tradition, and you know, it, and yeah, so they're coming from, more often than not, they're coming from some sort of brokenness.
But the
Like,
violence you're saying, like it's parents hitting, or sorry, it's kids violence against the
kids
parents.
attacking each other.
Kids attack each other.
Yeah,
Okay.
just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
cyberbullying that ends
Oh
up in
yeah.
fist fights.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And all kinds of other craziness that goes on. There's a little bit of gang activity that we
Yeah.
see, and again, and
In
13,
Brantford.
14-year-olds.
Yep.
That's
Is it what's the demographic makeup? Like is it certain like ethnicities or
no,
anything, or is it just all across the board?
no,
Broken
no.
families.
Our group is yeah, no, it's our, like, the demographics of the youth center would be mostly white, and then there would be a native mix in there.
Yeah, that was
But
my thought.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
but yeah, it's really, it's not a ethnic thing. It's more of a socioeconomic thing,
Yeah.
and they feed each other, right?
Yo, big time.
And this is what we see is the cycle.
Yep.
Right? How do we, and so much of the work that we do is focused on breaking cycles.
Yep. Yep. Repairing, getting in there, building up the kids, hopefully repairing them so they can make maybe repairing is the wrong word, but
Giving them tools,
giving them the tools to create
investing
a
in
healthy
them.
environment. Yeah. And a healthy family one day, hopefully too.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. Okay, what Indwell? This may be a little more familiar with some of the listeners, but I personally don't know a ton about it. So what's Indwell all about, and to bring it to Brantford, what does that mean?
I'll do my best to explain it then. Hopefully I don't get anything wrong. So Indwell is a faith-based organization that focuses on housing. Sorry, everybody, if I get this wrong, Justin. Basically, housing the unhoused is essentially it. They're focused on, if I understand it correctly, single dwelling units. So one or two people living in a unit of probably 350 square feet, and everything that they do that I'm familiar with has staff as well, different levels. There's units that have just basic supports, make sure you're help you do your medication, help you get some paperwork done, some legal stuff.
Yep.
Make your appointments, things like that.
Yep.
And then they have all the way up to like enhanced support, where you've got 15 people who are have serious addiction issues and things like that, and they have 24/7 supports.
Okay.
Yeah.
So supported housing environment for homeless people, or people who are unhoused.
Yep.
if that's
No,
not the
that's
correct
right.
term.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, cool. And so it exists. It started where? Hamilton, maybe?
I believe it started in Hamilton.
I think
Yeah.
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now
That's where it's
is it in
based.
a few other cities at
Yeah.
this point?
So they've so I'm not a part of it. I'm part of a group that's trying to bring it into Brantford. But it's funny, if you look on their website, they'll show all of the municipalities that they're in.
Okay.
And so they go Hamilton, Norfolk, Woodstock, London,
Yep.
Chatham. And if you
Yep.
look at the map, there's basically this all
whole-
of Southern Ontario with a big hole in Brantford Brant.
Yeah.
And Brantford has a need for this.
Yep.
And so we'd like to see, especially this group, but at least somebody help with some of the challenges that we have in Brantford.
And what does it mean to bring that to Brantford? Like, because obviously there's a construction element to this,
Mhm.
right? There's a business side to this. It's a nonprofit though, correct?
Yeah,
Or
it's a really interesting model, and I don't want to misrepresent it, so I'll be careful. But essentially, they typically build or inherit or buy a building. I think typically they like to build. Now they even have a building wing. I think it's even separated from Indwell
yeah,
now. And yeah, you'll identify the need. How many units can you build or should you build? You'll
yep,
identify the land.
yep,
In some cases, they've had land or buildings given to them,
yep.
and so that's definitely a tree you want to shake. And then uh, there is different types of funding from all over the place. A very large portion of it is government funding
Yep,
that would go toward the construction, and then also toward ongoing staff,
of
uh,
course. Yeah.
paying the staff, right? But there's also a community component to this. They get private dollars, and they look for especially for the startup, the launch of it, a capital campaign from the community.
Yep.
Um, and what's really interesting about it is that a lot of the time when you build affordable housing or supportive housing, although more and more those overlap, um, it's kind of like the city does it or the province does it, and there's not enough money, and there's all kinds of political backlash, and nobody really advocates for it, and it kind of becomes a sore spot. And in this case with Indwell, I think you get the reverse. You get community buy-in and support ahead of time.
Hmm.
A little bit of structure to the community accepting it and wanting it and choosing it, and then going and doing a good job of it,
Yeah.
where there's a little bit of accountability and and
We,
uh, and passion to it as well.
yep. Yeah, we've done a few of those projects on the commercial door end of things, and
Okay,
they're not fun. No, it's just it's always a mess. It feels like, and yeah, no money there too. That's the other thing.
there's a hopelessness in
Yeah,
some of those places.
definitely, and there's no, I don't know, not like there's a ton of craftsmanship, but like yeah, it just feels like it's also lacking in that area too.
Yeah,
It's usually like low grade materials,
yeah.
which I understand. You have to there's a budget, but yeah. Okay, interesting. So basically, what it would mean to get an Indwell project off the ground, or Indwell in Brantford would be to get a project off the ground, I guess, right? So you need to find land, or you need to have something donated, or a building to purchase to renovate. Like that's basically where it's at right now.
Yeah, I where it is right now, we've sort of made some connections with Indwell in the city and some churches.
Yeah.
Um, and The city of Brantford is also going through a rezone right now. So
Yeah.
not to get too technical, but there's some um, there's some key real technical details, I would say, that are being explored right now,
Okay.
uh, by us, and we're in contact with them.
Yep.
Um, and so yeah, uh, there's encouraging motion there.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
But it's been like, and this is just, I'm trying to describe the process or understand the process more
yeah,
in case other people are interested in doing this in
for sure.
their given areas. So, how long have you been involved with it? How long
Yeah.
has the effort been around to get it into Brantford? And what has that been like?
They've tried before, and for different reasons, it hasn't moved forward. I think that our group has been meeting for about a year,
Okay.
uh, and um, we've identified some properties that may be of use,
Yep.
and so Indwell is aware of those. I believe the city is aware of most of those, and then right now, we've also identified how many homeless people are there in Brantford, and it's not just homeless people. Um, and maybe we'll talk about this a bit, but one of my incentives for doing this is one of Why Not's projects is housing young men and housing teen moms, and so we need places for them to go once they
Got it.
once they leave. And so it's really finding people who just need affordable housing, or just a little bit of um, support on an ongoing basis, just to kind of keep them going.
Yeah.
Um, and so and so we've identified some of the needs, the size of some of the lists, how many units that Brantford wants to have built.
Right.
Right, Brantford has they've it's public knowledge that sort of that they have I think it's like a 5-year goal of starting I think 500 affordable units publicly and 300 privately. So
Hmm.
this would fall under the Indwell would fall under the private
Yep.
section. Um, and so they're essentially they're in a stage of what would this look like, and developing a model that they could take public.
Yep.
And again, I don't want to overstate where they're at, because there's things that happen in Indwell that I'm not aware of, or can't really speak to.
Yep.
But that's sort of where it's at, is this exploratory phase of putting a coherent vision together that we can start to see if we can make real.
Yeah, but you really need a partnership locally between obviously the community
Yeah.
at large, and then also local city officials and whatnot too, right?
Yes.
To make that happen.
You need the right few people
Yeah.
to sign off on a project
in
like
the
this.
key spots. Yeah. Okay. So if somebody wanted to do this locally themselves, it's Indwell's only Ontario based though, right? Or do they
I
have?
believe so. That's an interesting question.
Yeah. Well, guys, we do have listeners from across the country, so
Yeah.
but I don't know. I would imagine there's other similar type organizations out there, but at
I
least
think-
maybe in BC.
Yeah, I don't know how much I because the laws change, but I suspect that Indwell could grow like that, and
Yeah.
I know that there are other organizations doing similar things.
Yeah.
So
There must be. There's definitely a need out there for that sort of thing. Big time. So
it's enormous, right? And it's it's almost, where do you start with it? And
Yeah.
because the
It's-
cost.
oh yeah, I'm sure there's multiple things at play there, right? Like there's a substantial homeless population, and there's also rising construction costs and carrying costs and whatnot too.
Yeah, I think there's a large opportunity for the church here as well, and I think that um, I think organizations like Safe Families play into this too. When we have one of the experiences that I've had is we have this home through Why Not, where we house teen moms, and when they are ready to move in with us, when they're 6 months pregnant and never parented before and in a state of crisis, they're probably not in a state where just any church family with empty nesters, say, who have had a healthy family and sent them all off to get married and have grandkids and a couple extra rooms and things like that. They're probably not ready to take on someone like that. But after they leave our care, they've had their baby, they've been taught how to budget and parent and cook and all these different things. They just can't afford a place, you know. With a little extra structure, something like Safe Families, where you're kind of a host house
Mhm.
and you're offering a room or something like that. That to me is a model that could work, and it doesn't cost $400,000 a unit.
Mm.
So there's all of these opportunities that sort of overlap.
Yep. Yeah, you're looking to solve this problem one way or the other, right?
Well, what the thing is, you meet these 16-year-olds
Yeah.
who their parents probably went through the same thing. Like often, if you think about, okay, you're 16, you're pregnant, you're going to move in somewhere, you're probably already living on someone's couch because you had trauma in your past, or you had some sort of brokenness in your past. A 16-year-old teenager that gets pregnant moves in with us. They're probably living, they could be living at a boyfriend's house or maybe somebody else's house, and they just were able to, crash on the couch. They have very little instruction around, why they shouldn't get pregnant, or even how not to, and all these different things. Like,
Yep.
you might be surprised that, like, people just don't know stuff until you teach them. And so then they get pregnant. What do? They freak out. And what's likely to happen is they don't have a safe place for the baby. That baby gets apprehended and goes off on its own journey now, right? It's foster care and potentially eventually adoption. The mom spirals. This is how you get drug addicted 30-year-old women. That because they, imagine the brokenness that, like, you lose this baby that you wanted and that you love and that you had, and you just couldn't take care of.
Yeah.
Right. And so they just need a little bit of support there. And um, a mom like that might try to replace that baby, and now you've got just this mess,
Cycle. Yeah.
this cycle mess, right? And that person their mom may have been in that same spot. Um, but then you bring them into a house like ours, and they're doing swimming lessons like 3 weeks later. Like, they're amazing and they're resilient. And when you get to know them, you go like, this is like every other teenager I've ever met. Like, this
Yeah.
person is interchangeable with like all the girls I went to high school with. Like, they come from different circumstances, and you go, why is this a problem? Why
Yeah.
haven't we solved this yet?
Yeah.
And when you start to look around, you go, the pieces are here. God's got lots of money. There's tons of us. We got lots of empty bedrooms,
Yeah.
and it's not that it's simple. They're complicated. They need structure.
Yeah.
And that's where I found myself mostly, is in the structure part of it, right? Like,
Right.
how do you organize? How do you bring people together to agree
Yeah.
on core values
Yeah.
and focus on those and solve problems? Because it's like, it's it it's so obvious, right? And when you get to do that kind of work, you go home at night, and like I had this when I was, ripping walls out, getting that girls' home ready. I'd go home, and like my house needed repair and renovation and stuff like that. And I'd come home at the start, I'd come home like, shoot, I haven't gotten to that,
Yeah.
you know? And then by the end, I started going, you know what? No, this is a worthwhile trade.
Yeah.
Like it almost, and so like the mud patches in my entryway at my house sort of became like a symbol to me of like, okay, that's the trade I'm making. Like, I'm
Yeah.
okay with this.
Yeah.
And you know what, if my kids grow up and they go, hey, our house was never nice, it's like, oh, this is why, you
Yeah.
know? And I don't know, that's the more and more I get exposed to it, that's why I want to live.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so tell us a little more about that the girls' home then and that expansion
Yeah.
or addition.
So why not? And over the forget the years now, but sometime over the pandemic, open, or just before, maybe open the guys' home. So basically, teenage guys, a lot of kind of why not graduates, if I can call them that, who just needed affordable place to live, maybe some extra job training, really set them up for life. Um, and then so we launched that. There's basically 3 bedrooms in that home, and then one of the we had a local epidemic during the pandemic, which was pregnancies. And remember, we deal with teenage girls. I think we had like 10 or 11 pregnancies come through the youth center um, over the year of 2020, something
Wow.
like that. Um, and so we went, and one of the things you're doing is when you sort of living in a real relationship with young people like that, is you're like, I'm sort of responsible. Like, I'm, for these people, they're looking at me like, where am I going to go?
Yeah.
And some of them are going to get kicked out. Some of them are, whether it be that they're planning to keep the baby, or like, get an abortion or you're out, or they're getting kicked out anyway, or something. Most of them want to keep the baby anyway. And you start looking around like, okay, where can a 16-year-old who has nowhere to go, who is pregnant, stay and have the baby and learn how to be a parent? And the answer was nowhere,
Yeah.
which was like,
Not a good answer.
especially as a young person,
Yeah.
it makes you angry.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why are we here? And that's not to say that those organizations don't exist. They do. They're full, especially during this time when we had
A lot of pregnancies.
a lot of pregnancies. So did everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is that a lot of them were far away, right? So like the closest ones, I think, are like Woodstock, London, or maybe Kitchener in this case, and then Burlington, which
Yeah.
were full anyway. But for a lot of sort of inner city population, it might as well be on the moon.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the idea of moving that far away,
Yeah.
they just won't do it because there's too many other variables, and they don't know how to operate in that space. They need something local they
They
can
probably
do.
don't drive.
They don't drive.
People don't
Yeah.
have licenses
No.
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. So especially this population, it's rare for us to have a mom who's got a license and a car, because you got
Well,
to
that
remember,
too. Of
right? You got to
course.
be able to afford the thing.
Yep.
And so yeah, we said, okay, this is something that we want to go with. There was already a group meeting in town that I happened to be a part of, that was working on this, and our executive director at the time was very passionate about it, and so she sort of spearheaded the project, and we started house shopping and talking to a few key people, and we found this. It was interesting, God's timing too, because I had gone through a home a couple years earlier as part of this other group, and it was perfect. It was a stone's throw from the hospital. It had 6 bedrooms plus like a downstairs you could kind of make into something else. It backed onto green space. It was just perfect. It was perfect. And I said, God, why can't we buy this house? And it was crazy because at the time it was like 500 grand for this really big, nice 2-story house. It was perfect, which was, by the time we ended up buying, was probably worth like 800-900 grand. So it would have been just a good investment. But anyways, my point was like, God, what's, like I take it as a promise. I'm like, God's doing something here. And you know what? I kind of took it on faith. Whatever you've got in store for us is better.
Yeah.
And so time went on, and we started shopping for houses, and we go through some, and big this, and what's the budget, and how many can we fit, and what's the math on this? Really trying to dial down, and then we went through a few houses, and they had their different quirks and different things, and we came through this one, and it's it's on a half-acre lot. It's a 170-year-old mansion that was built for the MP at the time. It's got this unbelievable woodwork, like original woodwork inside. Like they call it like the waffle ceiling, or the
Yep.
I forget what it's called.
Is it like this up here?
It's like 2-foot squares.
Yeah. Oh man.
Coffered or chamfered or what? Anyways, but it's like
somebody's slamming their steering wheel.
Yeah, I know.
Coffered ceiling. You're close.
Yeah,
I think
it'll come to us.
Yeah,
it's like new Gothic style. It's got like unbelievable history in it.
Yeah,
original woodwork. But it's been updated. Like it has all new electrical, and it has like a chef's kitchen and heated floors and in the kitchen, and
wow.
and like the bedrooms are like these big have big vaulted ceilings.
Yeah,
and it's an amazing house because it's beautiful, but it's also got this character and this richness to it where it's not like almost anybody could be comfortable in it. Like if you're used to
it's not so ornate that you're like, I don't even want to live here.
It's not so fancy like a really bougie house would be.
Yeah.
That you'd be like, oh, this is some rich girl's room. But like a rich girl, if I can put it that way, could live in this house and be like, this is nice. And somebody who didn't come from any wealth could live in it and go, this isn't like weird.
I don't feel bad sitting on the couch or whatever.
No, not even that. Just like
comfortable.
It's comfortable. It's kind of comfortable to everybody. And it's just like, to me, it's like in the neighborhood, the neighbors call it the castle. Yeah. And the idea that these girls kind of come in and it's like,
it's a refuge.
It's a refuge, but it's got so much dignity to it, and it just like kills me. Like it's hilarious that, you've got these, we'll have up to 7 moms in there soon. And they're basically in this dining room where when you close the doors, it's just like ornate wood, floor to ceiling. Like it was meant for like important conversations when they were forming Canada, and because this house was built in 1856, and the MP, John A. MacDonald is rumored to have this is talk about slamming your steering wheel. John A. MacDonald is rumored to have had a heart attack in this house. Okay, no confirmation on that, but the timing is right around when it was around, I guess, and when the MP would have owned it.
Yeah.
Right. And it was owned by
who was the MP? Was it the first MP of Brantford?
It was the first MP of Brant. We have it written down somewhere, but I don't know.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll look it up.
It was coffered ceiling, by the way.
Yeah. And it's so anyways, we find this house, and it was the first house that was like, and it's on a half-acre lot, backs on a green space, it's walking distance to everything, but it's in a nice neighborhood. And it was just like this is it. And then you have a few key people in town that came up with the money for a down payment. And then we ran a campaign. We raised $1 million in a year to pay this thing down, to almost eliminate our debt. We did some renovation. We turned the old coach house into a 2-story, 2-bed, 2-bath live-in apartment for our house parents. So now we have people who live there full time who can cover. Now we have staff that come in during the day as well.
Okay.
But it's basically this full wraparound we've got people who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They have nice separate space, right? And
Okay.
full supports.
Yeah.
It's got a fenced yard and tons of parking and all kinds of stuff, and it's just like, like, like God had a plan,
Yeah.
and that's really cool to be a part of.
That's awesome. Right
Yeah.
on. Cool. So that's for the girls. And then you mentioned the guys earlier, right? So that was already
Yep.
set up.
Yep.
Okay. Gotcha. So you got both those things going on, but then you still, after that, you wanted to get involved in Indwell that we chatted about, or was it like during that process that you were like, we also need to do this?
There's always been discussions, right? Because you start to bump into the same characters when you
Of
do
course.
this work.
Yeah.
And you start to go, okay, what are the obvious next steps? Because we got these girls and they come in, they have their baby, and they get stable.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where are they going to live after
Yeah.
this? They can't live with us forever because we don't have enough money. I'd love to do that, but
Yeah.
we need to. This is a program. Once they
you on your
graduate the
feet.
program, we've only succeeded if you can move on from here, right?
Yeah.
And we explored Indwell as part of that, and so there was a few of us that sort of started asking questions and making connections around who are the stakeholders here. How do we get connected with the right churches, the right community leaders, right church leaders, so that Indwell can make a plan and
Yeah.
come into town, and or whoever, but somebody who can come in and build some affordable housing that more of these young people who just don't have somewhere to go, and where some of them find to go is not safe, especially for their kids.
Yeah.
And how do you make a plan around meeting that need?
Yeah, that's a challenging problem for sure. Tough ones. Okay. So we touched on a lot so far, but we should touch a little more on safe families. So for any listeners who remember, if they were following with us back then, episode 52, we had Hildy Slutz on from Safe Families, and we did the whole shebang on what Safe Families is all about. But can you give us a little brief primer on what Safe Families is, and then why you're specifically trying to bring it to Hull and Norfolk?
Safe Families is a Christian structure for churches to do for the community what they already do for themselves. So you think about, and I was witness to this growing up in the Reformed tradition. If somebody falls, we pick them up, right?
Yeah.
We take responsibility for them, and we're patient with them.
Yep.
We'll invest in that. And to me, that's what it is, just broader. And that's so much of everything else that I've gotten involved in. It's just like, it's all learned from the church. It's just applied to outside the church. And it has, all kinds of benefits and impacts. And so Safe Families is essentially you get a local chapter set up. It's set up by, you kind of get a local board, if you can call it that. And you fundraise, and you hire basically 2 staff, and they will onboard and train people from your church to be different types of support for different types of needs. So you could have families that just need a babysitter once in a while.
Yep.
You could have people who just need a mentor or what they call a family friend, and all the way up to what, I'm going through a crisis. I need someone to watch my kids for an extended period of time.
Yep.
And the church has the capacity, but individuals don't necessarily have the insurance and the know-how and the training and somebody to sort of fall back on, right? And so that's where Safe Families is so amazing, is it just empowers the church to do what it's already doing at a larger scale.
Mm-hmm. That's a great primer. I love that.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't get that wrong.
No. It's jogging my memory to all the conversation I had with Hildy and whatnot too. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so what's it take to get Safe Families started up in Hull and Norfolk?
So we're looking for a couple of key people to be what they call on the steering committee.
Okay.
And essentially the steering committee will go around, raise awareness and find out kind of who wants to be involved.
Yep.
in this once we get some money raised and some structure set up. And then we'll basically raise some money and hire some staff.
Yeah.
Like that's it in a nutshell.
Who's the profile or is it anybody like who would be able to help out? Like you mentioned earlier, like, okay, empty nester, bedrooms, whatever. but I'm like, oh, like, okay. So for myself, like, okay, so I'm married. I have one child, one on the way,
Yeah.
any day now, actually. So
Oh, congrats.
whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thanks. So if I get a call,
I was gonna say, check
I
your phone. Check your phone.
should keep an eye on my
Yeah.
phone in case I missed that call. But
Yeah.
no, it's just work stuff for now. But anyways, yeah, like who is able to help out? Because you mentioned there's kind of like you can be a mentor or something. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe it's something I could do, whatever. But like we wouldn't have room to take on extra people, and
Yeah.
I know most young families are in the same sort of spot. So
Yeah. Most of it is not taking on people.
okay,
Some of it is. And so there's different. One of the beautiful things about it, kind of like the food drive, there's just different roles, and
yeah,
you can kind of fit in where you can. Like right now, if somebody has a loss in the family,
yeah,
what do? You bring them a meal,
oh
right?
yeah, 100%,
You
yeah,
kind of you fill in,
yep,
right? Or you watch, babysit them, whatever.
yep,
And so that's a big part of it is meeting those kind of specific needs, or even just being a friend, right? It's like can your family go hang out with somebody else's family who's just, maybe they're new to town, maybe they're going through something
yep,
and they just want to hang out. Maybe you're the same age as them and they have kids your kids' age, right?
yep,
Can you go just be their friend because they just don't have a lot of that right now?
yep,
And then speak into, there's other things you can do. Um, you know, maybe that you go clean their house, something like that. So
yep,
there's all kinds of roles from like just not even being involved in people and
yep,
baking meals,
yep.
and that type of thing, all the way up to yeah, bring people into your home.
Cool.
Yeah,
Well, I know we have a bunch of listeners in Holden, Norfolk.
yeah,
So any of y'all listening, see if you can help out. It's a good
yeah.
organization.
We're looking for 2 or 3 or 4 more key uh, steering committee members,
Yep.
and then hopefully in the next year or so we'll
Yep.
be hiring staff and seeing some opportunity for churches for people to sign up and get training for those types of roles.
Yep. Basically, you need a couple go getters to be like, we want to bring this here, and then
Yeah,
we're willing to put the work in to do that.
yeah. Go getters ready to serve, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's good. Like, sounds like it'll be a bit of work, but it's very
totally.
important and meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Helpful too.
It's good for us too, like that's the one
Absolutely.
thing that I would say about all of this type of work
Yeah.
is it's not just about, if you're making housing, it's not just about those people. It's about everybody. It's about big donors, you know, experiencing an interaction with Jesus and Jesus people,
Yep.
right? It's about the church kind of. I think it's good for you, and I think you'll learn too. You learn so much when you kind of get out there and change things up and meet new people and
Yep.
kind of God teaches us when we do that stuff.
Right on. Complete side note. William Patterson, I think, was the MP's name. Does that ring a
Okay.
bell?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I
Fair enough.
it could have said anything, but probably that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
MP for like 24 years in that time period.
That would make
So
sense.
that
Yeah.
makes it checks out. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I just had to throw that tidbit in there for
Yeah.
anyone still caring about that. But okay, cool. So back on the program here. So we were going to talk about adoption at some point.
Mm.
If you're comfortable talking about that process, what's that kind of been like for your family? And
Yeah.
and it maybe give some insight into, if you're comfortable again, why you went down that road of international adoption specifically.
Yeah. So I would not count myself an expert on this, although I'm learning quickly. We are in the home study, and we have we're in the home study phase, and we have an agency retained for our adoption. And so what happens is when you do an international adoption is it's very, very funny. They say, okay, you have to pick a country.
Yep.
um, and there's other requirements around the age of your own kids and things like that. Um, and picking a country to us was so foreign. We had talked. Maybe I should back up. We had talked since early in our marriage about the idea of adoption, and it was something we were always open to. We had actually looked at fostering early in our marriage as well, and ended up getting pregnant, and so that kind of went on hold for a while. And so we have 2 children of our own. We've also experienced a number of like pregnancy losses and in the first trimester, um, and and my wife had had particularly hard like second trimesters, lots of headaches and things like that. And so we kind of said, hey, we have room, and we've always talked about adoption. Makes a lot of sense for us, so let's explore it. Um,
Yep.
and I think, but we just always had an openness to we have this openness to like when they asked what country do you want, we don't care.
Yeah, I've
So
talked to other people about this before too. It's a very weird thing.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so we said, well, where's there, where isn't there a line? How do you sort of just um, find a baby that needs a family who might not find one as quickly if you weren't in that line, kind of thing.
Right.
Um, and so that is the probably the foundation of why we're international. Now, I should say that so we have a 1.5-year-old and a 4-year-old. So anybody who's familiar with adoption will know that our the baby we adopt will have to be very young. The baby has to be, according to Ontario law or Ontario rules, they can be flexed. It has to be 18 months younger than your youngest.
Oh, of
Okay, so we have an 18-month-old,
course.
and so we'll have our dossier submitted by the end of the year, which means we'll be available to a 6-month-old, and then we expect that process to take another uh, anywhere from a couple of months to get matched up to a year. And so we would have a 3-year-old at the time, and a year from then, and so we would up
Right.
to an 18-month-old, which really fits in with what we're looking at.
Yep.
We're also so we chose India because
Okay.
we looked at well
Population demographics.
well no we had just looked yeah we had looked at a number of different countries like there's a lot of countries that are just full or closed right now. So we looked at South Korea. South Korea's closed. We looked at Haiti. Haiti's closed. I think South Korea's closed right now. They've had issues over the year. South Africa, the program is full right now. The Eastern Bloc countries and some of the African countries are either closed or full. And so we looked around and India was an obvious one. And we also we learned that in India, so because we had existing children of our own, and because we were open to uh, potentially adopting a sibling pair, um, we would be placed in the special needs program in India. What we learned through that is that in India, there's a lot of special needs uh, orphans, if I can use that term, um, who have medical issues that are not a problem in Canada.
Oh,
So you have kids that are in this program, but they have a cleft lip. They have they may have club foot. They may have uh,
like diabetes or something, or like,
yeah. Well, I don't know about diabetes per se, or that you would know that young because you're
I
talking
guess.
about right.
Yeah.
But there's basically like you even have some. You could have. I've seen this. I mentioned this because I've seen it a couple of times in different videos and stories I've heard. But essentially, you could have someone was neglected at birth, which is a trauma, which could put you in the special needs anyway. Um, and you could have like rats nibbling on like their toes or something like that, right? And now they've got these challenges and they end up in the special needs program. If you're a preemie baby,
Yeah.
you end up in the special needs, and it's like there's all of these, and that's not to say that there aren't real like
Of
serious
course.
needs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's everywhere from Down syndrome and missing limbs and AIDS and everything in that program. But you start to understand that there's just so much need out there, and we have the capacity too. Like if we have a child who's got um, some of these issues, we can deal with that.
Yep.
And when you have your own baby, as you know, I mean, they can have their own challenges too,
Oh yeah. You
right?
never know what you're getting into.
So
Yep.
so yeah, that's how we picked India.
Cool. Cool, man. That's awesome. Um. Okay. Yeah, we could go a little more into adoption, maybe, but we've covered it a little bit before, and I think people do know about that topic to a fair degree.
Mhm.
Um. I guess maybe to kind of bring it close to a close, I should say. Kind of the overall message really is just about personal responsibility and getting involved in your local community. So if you were to give others advice, and maybe you do this if people come to you, what's a good entry point, or how can people get started?
Mm.
Especially, I mean, if they're someone in my shoes who's younger family or whatever, or younger person, single or married, or even someone who listens to this and they're in their later years and they have maybe not the energy as much, but they have the time, and they're retired, and maybe some resources. What are some nice entry points for people kind of on either end of the spectrum, or even in the middle, someone like an empty nester?
Yeah. Um, think about this a lot, and I think the short answer is volunteer.
Yep. Just
Um,
do something.
yeah, and I've had this conversation with a couple of young men in particular, but just young people. Um, when you are young and you volunteer, what I have found and what I have seen is that there aren't that many people doing that. So you will excel quickly. Um, you know, it, um, and when you get into these roles and you get into sort of teaching and interacting with people, you learn a lot. Um, but then, I learned how to part of learning how to manage people, which I do at my day job. I learned from volunteering. Um, I learned, managing money. I learned how to raise money. I learned how to speak in front of people, all from volunteering. I showed up at a church one time to give my why not spiel, and I was told about 10 minutes the uh, before the service that I was the sermon, and gave a 20-minute sermon essentially, based on the why not stuff. Um, and you grow capacity, and the other thing is it's safe. We have I was in preparation. I was listening to some of your other um, episodes, and I think it was episode 5 with Ian Wildbohr.
Oh yeah, that's so funny. So I'm
Yeah.
doing prep for episode 100, and
Okay.
that was one of the top 5 I picked out, and I was literally listening to that this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? If I, and I don't want to put he's a pastor, so I don't want to put myself on the same level. But I'm like, this is like part 1 of 2, or like these are like so on the note, like so related to what I do, to what I see as important in the church, or that's
He,
probably a better way to put that.
he
But
just Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Um, a- and I'll lose it.
No, it's all good. I was just gonna jump in and say he
Yeah.
described that, like, if I could attempt to summarize that one.
Yeah.
A lot of what we spoke about in that episode, which is about missions, and that was episode 5. If anyone wants to go check it out, because it was a really good one. He talked about theology of presence,
Mm,
right? And that's, I think, what you described to us just now is that this relational aspect
yeah.
to sharing the gospel, and that, I mean, it's kind of a cliche. You don't need to beat people over the head with the Bible. Not that I don't think people do a lot of that today, because I think everyone kind of instinctively knows that that's not terribly effective, especially when it's not how it used to be, right? We talked about in that episode with Ian, like, if you were of the boomer generation, right, you generally knew Christianity and had either like chosen for it or against it, sort of thing. And
Yeah.
then we've trickled down through the generations, and now people in my like Generation Z, like,
It's not that way anymore.
no, people
Yeah.
don't know anything.
What I was gonna say
Sorry,
was
go ahead.
that no, it came back to me was around the idea of kind of the social anxiety,
Oh,
and
that's
and Ian brought that up.
yeah, he did.
Um,
Yeah.
and it was interesting because I've when I started the helped start the first food drive in Caledonia, it was like a 6-month slog. It was awful, right? Like, because I was a bit of a perfectionist, and I put like so much effort into this thing but I was young and I was trying to do a good job. And so I kind of lived that out. Um, and when it was finally done, it was just like I felt like sick, tired, like you kind of got to the end, but it had all of these like exposures to it. But it was also like you could carry this weight, but you could sort of hand it over to God. And I even remember getting sort of a vision or an image in my head at the time of just like um, the silhouette of a bigger person, kind of representing God over my shoulders, kind of like this isn't on my shoulders, it's on God's shoulders. And what happens is when you take on responsibility, but it's on God, it gives you the ability to be comfortable with all of that responsibility.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
and that applies to business as well. Not necessarily that you're I think
Oh, it does. It
it
does. You're
crosses
right.
over to business,
You're right.
but it teaches your brain to think that way a
Yep.
little bit, right? And so if you can get this like public speaking in a way that's like, well, it's you can kind of give it up to God, and you can learn all of these skills in this safe and meaningful
Yep.
atmosphere,
Yep.
and then grow on it and go out from it. Right now, you're doing good. right? You're you're growing your faith and you're exposing yourself to new things that you've got to figure out um, in your faith and with God.
Yep.
You're trusting God,
Yep.
right? So it's this whole new thing, and for me, that was a big step in just getting rid of anxiety. Like I don't know, I'm not really that anxious anymore, but when I was younger, I had some of that, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And you learn to work that out. And I think that volunteering as a young person is one of the smartest things that, somebody who's like late teens, early 20s can do. You'll make all these connections, you'll make all these friends, and you'll gain all these free experiences uh, in a in a safe environment, and you'll probably rise through the ranks quickly.
Yes.
I was 28 years old when I became chair of this organization, and it's you sort of got to rise to the occasion, right? And I've learned a lot on the fly, and I haven't done it perfectly, but and then uh, I'm chairing our church's facility expansion team right now, and I sort of know how to chair a committee now. Like
Yeah.
how to make agendas and how to keep minutes
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how to keep an agenda moving along. Although some people will say I'm still learning how to do that, right? But you kind
Yeah.
of
That's a
balance all
skill.
these things, right? And
Yeah.
it's all stuff that you learn through volunteering and learn through the church, and it all feeds each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I've heard it said before, but it's like opportunity lies where responsibility has been abdicated.
Mm, mm,
It's very true.
I like that.
I find it all the time. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of areas of life where what you just said is very applicable to, in terms of there's not a lot of people volunteering or taking on this task or taking on this, even in a career aspect, right? Like, go to where the demand is. Like, there's not a lot of people doing this. Like, give that a shot,
Yeah.
do your best. And yeah, if you're doing your best, honestly, and then you just leave the rest up to God, like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And he's going to take care of it. I don't know. It's a very freeing feeling. And maybe that's easy for, I don't struggle with anxiety personally, and maybe that's because I have that mentality. It probably is, but also it's not a like a I have lots of weaknesses, but that's not one that I particularly have usually. But it is just a freeing mindset to have to take on all of life. Really, I find.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sorry, I probably cut you off again. If you keep going, otherwise I
No,
got.
no, I'm sure I could talk about this for many hours, and like, to me, it's just it's really some of these experiences have really just taught me to rely on God, but what I've sort of learned is that God has always prioritized His relationship with me over the work that you could say that I'm doing with Him or for Him, right? So you think of, okay, Christian charity, you're doing a leadership role, you're trying to set up a new building, right? And I've always found that I need to just stay close to him, stay aware of his what he's doing and also what he's doing in me, what he's teaching me, um, and not try to run ahead of that, not try to leave him behind. Like, oh, you sent me to set up a building. See you when I'm done, God, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a journey with him, and that brings you deeper, and um, yeah, I would just share that as an encouragement to anybody who's got big plans or big things on the go. That's something I've learned through trial.
Yeah.
Um,
You got to lean
yeah,
on them every day.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure, man. Okay. Well, I think to put a bow on it, like, um, when you're doing all this work, right, you see a lot of brokenness. There's obviously great need. That's a large reason why you're so involved, is because you've seen the problems and you're like frustrated about it. Like, man, we need to solve this.
Mm,
More people got to get involved. Are Despite all of that, I think you've also seen that when good people do get involved and the work happens and the Lord blesses it fundamentally, like, great things can happen for ultimately for the Lord's glory. But
mm.
even just in the immediate sense of helping people with their primary basic needs of shelter and food here on Earth, are you hopeful now, having looking back on the last number of years of your involvement? Are you a hopeful guy, Mike? Do you think there's a good I don't know. Are you excited for the future in terms of what people can get involved with, from a volunteering standpoint, or do you think otherwise?
Mm.
We never got into your the end of times view or anything. So I don't know what
This might get there. This might get there.
Yeah, can of
Um,
worms.
my hope is in Christ, if I can put it that way. You know what? When I think about my future interacting with my Savior, I am hopeful and I am excited for that. Am I hopeful for this earth or the direction of things? Uh, you know, volunteering is down. I don't know how far I should go on this. Giving is tougher this year. Although the Lord's been faithful in that.
Yeah.
You know what? Like, I guess, and I'm stealing this from somebody else, but I guess it depends on how long of a horizon you're talking about.
Yeah, long, not just like next year.
Like, well, I am when I see North America, and I'll try to keep this tight.
No, that's fine.
Well, when I see North America, like I think that we're comfortable. I think we're really comfortable. The average North American is like the top, whatever 1% or.
So I think if you're above 34 grand,
yeah, you're 1%. Yeah, well, most of us have 2 cars.
Yeah.
And those people who are comfortable typically have these amazing skills that have gotten them there, right? Like they run a business, they have organizational skills, they have people skills, communication skills, all these really important things for ministry, right? And I'll lean on Ian a little bit, Ian Wildboard a little bit for this. I'm getting to the point, kind of like he said, where I in some cases I'd be willing to challenge people to assess, like, do we want to live to a higher level, to a higher standard, or do we want to sort of invest in our community? And is there great value, even for us, even especially spiritually, for living a little more hand to mouth, having to rely on the Lord for what's, for next week, next month type of thing. There's a lot of people out there. If it's that easy to start a girls' home like we did, if there's all these existing needs, and we're going, okay, we gave, our piece. Now we're off to the cottage. Now we're off to the Florida home. Now we're going on the boat. All of this different stuff. And even just, I think about people in retirement to consider, if you retired early because you ran a business well, I'd wager to put my neck out there and say that God isn't calling you to do nothing for the next 30 years. And I'm not saying, a lot of people aren't just doing nothing, but right. Like to really challenge ourselves. And I guess my point is that, I think that in the medium term, I think that we could see a decline, and the state of things. I think most people feel it,
fiscally speaking, or spiritually speaking.
I would say that they go together. I would say that, and not necessarily that, but it's, I don't think it's a secret or contested that the church in Canada is shrinking. That the Christian church in Canada is shrinking, and that people are sort of falling away, and that Gen X, is not really holding on to some of the Christian beliefs that they grew up with, right? And so I think in the short term, you're going to feel that we do feel that pain, right? There's people are less, they have less, a little bit less. They're also less looking to go out there and spend themselves on, the poor and the widow type of thing. Yeah. But what I think is that we have a powerful God who will meet our needs. And also, I think long term, what happens is the values that come out of a godless culture degrade the culture to the point where people eventually come back to God because of struggle that it creates. I mean, this is the story of the Old Testament. There are people who would draw political comparisons to one party gets in and messes everything up, and then everybody gets upset, and then the other one comes in, right? And it's a little bit the same on a longer term. So I think long term, I'm optimistic that God will redeem redeem
Yeah.
even like our little segment of history.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't sugarcoat this moment in time. I think God's been very good, and we've been blessed over the last number of years. But uh, I don't think that this is like the most. We're not in the middle of a revival right now. Um,
No. Although, yeah, I'm such an optimist, so I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
It's whatever. It is what it is.
Tell
But
me what you think. I'm curious.
yeah, I think it's gonna get a little worse before it gets better.
Yeah,
But I do think actually Cardis came out. Cardis is like a think tank or whatever in
yeah,
Ottawa, a Christian think tank. They came out with a study a couple months ago or weeks ago, maybe, showing kind of a revival amongst like people of my generation, like
yeah,
Gen Z, Gen Z, whatever you say, of the Zoomers, I guess they're called, of like people are like starting to look more back to tradition because they're
yeah.
like, we are so nihilistic and lost, like you said, searching, right? Like what's going on here? And so it's I don't know if there's like a real influx in reform churches per se,
Hmm.
and maybe like you're talking about the church shrinking in Canada, like the of the reformed churches, it's like it's maintenance. I think that's kind of where we're at. It's like the family structure is solid, the communities like we talked about,
Yeah,
but there's not like a real influx generally speaking.
yeah,
But then, sorry, the Gen Z or whatever, like they're coming into more of like the Catholic type tradition, or like even Orthodox, whatever, right? Looking for that real deep old structure that they're kind of longing for, which again I think we can offer a lot of that in the Reformed tradition, or even just in Christianity in general. Not to pigeonhole it too much. um I'm hopeful. Like I think in the muck and the mire of where we are in our culture, there lies in a fantastic opportunity to be, like you said, like to be the hands and the feet to those in need, and to show them the gospel in that. I just, at the end of the day, it's God's world, and if you're doing God's work works,
mm,
and it makes sense,
yeah.
and it helps people, and I think people see that and come around.
Do you think that this generation will be um, more maybe in tune with some of those socioeconomic needs because we're growing up
It's
like it's a little tighter for us? Like if you're, I think you said you're 24, right?
25. Yeah,
25.
yeah,
Okay. But
yeah,
are your friends, because you're kind of in that house buying stage, but at least you were, if you were like 5 or 7 years ago, you'd be in the house buying stage, but
yep.
probably less of your friends are now. So maybe we're more in tune with some of that, and then we'll look to solve those problems more. Do you feel like that's a trend?
Yeah, I think so. I think people are people are certainly aware of it.
Yeah.
You got to beg more on steel to get a place these days. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think people are certainly aware of the problem, and it's not just like, and to say it was easy breezy and people didn't have to work hard. I'm not saying that. I realize what interest rates were in the 80s and whatnot. Like
Yeah.
our parents certainly struggled, and grandparents especially, and there were definitely hard times. But I think we do have a unique economic situation these days, and it is challenging, particularly on the housing front, which is such a huge building block of getting your family off the ground. And
Yeah.
home ownership. Like, do you need to own a home? No, but is it a stable thing for your family to know that you're settled in a place? Absolutely. And it's a nice, yeah. Is it? It is kind of a luxury, honestly, where we're at these days. Like it honestly is.
Yeah, which is wild. And
Which
I
is, yeah.
I try to look at everything from like what is the model that can actually work for the average person, right? And so, and like you and I can talk about, because we have Dutch roots, and
Yep.
we can rattle the family tree or whatever, and try to make a house work. Because for some of us, we can still sort of squeeze into like a $400,000 house kind of
Yep.
thing, right? But that's about it. But for the average person, that's not the case
We have
anymore.
a lot of trade connections too in the Dutch
Yeah,
community.
yeah,
That's a huge thing, which I think people probably, if you're not from a community
yeah.
like that, like if you're not, Dutch or Italian or something, like you're kind of cooked.
And we're more rural, right?
Yeah, big
And
time.
and so you can kind of like, can I cordon off a corner of Jebediah's Field, or can I get a place in Simcoe or Dunn? You know what I mean? Like it's not
Yeah,
not the same as.
we'll move out there. That's the thing.
Yeah, we'll move, and we'll still also be within like 30-40 minutes of our family and our
Yeah,
church and stuff like that,
yeah,
right? And that's where I kind of look at like, man, we got some stuff going on, because it's just the average person, the average immigrant, the average, you know, middle class, 25-year-old is who went to university or whatever. It's like they're just stuck. They're just stuck,
yeah.
right? Like they can rent, But even that is coming to an end. They're not saving any money.
No.
And it's and yeah, I just see. Yeah, I wonder if as we lean into our communities and sort of address some of these problems, maybe because we're experiencing some of them ourselves, or we're closer to it. You know, if that's what if our churches will start to, you know, to lean into some of these more. And I wonder if that's part of, what could be part of a revival, right? People seeing like, the middle class having problems and seeing the church address them.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think we're already starting to feel the pinch in the walls of the church, and if that's the case now, it's that much worse. Like you say, just out in the general population, and
Yeah.
especially in a downtown core.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm hopeful. I mean, at the end of the day, God's in control. So
That's right.
just do our best and leave the rest up to Him.
That's right.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, it's been a lot of fun. Learned a lot. Appreciate you taking the time to join us, Mike.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. And if anybody has any feedback or anything for us, always happy to take that. You can send it in, send us an email. We'll put it in the show notes. And until next time, keep on Real Talk.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real Talk. In partnership with Reform Perspective, this show is created and produced by Tyler Vanderwood, Lucas Holtfleur, and Mariah Tamiga. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen or watch the show. If you have any feedback for us or ideas for future guests or topics, please let us know. You can reach us at reformedrealtalk@gmail.com. Be sure to also follow us on social media. You can search Reformed Real Talk on any of the platforms. We should come right up. Also, leave us a review, preferably a 5-star one, on any of the podcast platforms. That would be greatly appreciated. That's all for now, folks. Keep having real talk.